birth rates are generally flat. Death rates will likely rise in the future. At some point in the future, population growth is going to be purely from migration. And there's going to be parts of the country where it feels like a depression, a recession at least, on demographic demand for housing.
That's a strong statement. You got to at least name a couple if you're going to say that. I mean, that's pretty strong. Can you name a couple areas? Today, we are joined by Eric Finnigan, Vice President of Demographics Research at John Burns Consulting. His work is crucial for companies involved in housing, including homebuilders, rental developers, building material manufacturers. He leads the demographics research at the firm, helping clients understand demographic shifts that impact the housing market. Now, I noticed Eric with some of his viral posts on Twitter about demographic shifts. He's one of the only people reporting on real-time migration patterns, much more current than even the census or anything else I could find. And so today, we deep dive into how demographics are shaping the housing market right now, with a focus on migration patterns. We discuss San Francisco and Nashville. We look at post-pandemic living. This is a fascinating interview. It's one of my first podcasts where I interview someone, so I certainly appreciate Eric, and I hope you enjoy this. Please give me some feedback in the comments. Without further ado, let's watch the podcast. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thanks a lot for jumping on. I appreciate your time today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Would you tell me a little bit about who you are, what you're doing at John Burns? And, I'm a huge fan. I know you do demographics. I find it absolutely fascinating. And maybe just a little bit about what that is and how your role impacts the research you do at John Burns.
Eric Finnigan. I am currently a vice president of demographics research at John Burns Research and Consulting. At the firm, I lead our demographics research. Our whole mission is helping companies involved in housing. So, ranging from home builders to rental developers to building material manufacturers and everything in between, investors, et cetera, understand what's happening in the housing market, both nationally, regionally, and then down to the market levels, and then even down to the sub-market and micro market levels. So we help people understand what's happening today so that they can really make data-driven, informed decisions about the future, about their business, about their investments, about what to build, where to build, what to buy, what to sell. And in terms of demographics, John Burns, our founder, and Chris Porter wrote a book about 10 years ago called Big Shifts Ahead. And I have a copy of my bookshelf back there just to remind me of where this all kind of stems from. But the whole thrust of the book was that demographic trends are super impactful for housing trends. And you can make some pretty high conviction calls about demographics, a high conviction call about where things will be in 5 and 10 years from now. So the whole book is about some shifts that they saw coming 10 years ago, and most of them have come true at this point. So the demographics, in terms of our company, informs all of our other research and all of our other analysis. We kind of start with the foundation that, because housing is most households' largest purchase in their lifetime and their largest monthly expense, that understanding demographics goes a long way to understanding what's happening in housing. So that's sort of my domain. I start with the demographics. We have other people at our company that deal with specifically for sale housing. Other people focus on for rent housing. Other people look at building material manufacturers and kind of everything in between. My focus is on demographics.
That's awesome. Can you give me an example of, you said that a lot of what they said in that book came true. Was there one thing that stuck out to you as like pretty profound in terms of what they saw coming and then how it materialized?
Sure thing. So just to rewind back to, say, the middle of last decade, so 10 years ago, we were at the sort of the I guess maybe the end of a urbanization boom coming out of the great financial crisis. So the middle part of the 2000s decade to the middle part of the teens decade, people in the millennial generation were graduating school, and given the job market at the time, most of the jobs were in large cities. So New York, San Francisco, LA, DC, Seattle, even Portland. A lot of the major housing investment going on at that time. There's a lot of investment going into urban residential, multifamily, especially rentals. Housing had been overbuilt, coming up to the financial crisis and housing crash. And there was this wave of people that were aging into their household forming years, a bigger generation than the baby boomers even. And they needed somewhere to live. And again, urbanization was a big trend. And what they were calling out in the book was that, it's definitely happened, but we see a shift coming. And that shift is because, the leading edge of the millennials will eventually want to form families, have kids, have a yard, maybe have some pets. And that kind of lifestyle is really hard in a dense urban environment. Yet people had become accustomed to a lot of the urban amenities, like walkable restaurants, places where, you could go shopping or, again, go out to restaurants, go out to bars, kind of an urban environment, but more in a place where it's easier to live, easier to afford homes. What they're pointing to is that there'd be these sort of nodes around large, in major metros. If you're on the ground, look and feel like a walkable urban neighborhood, but they're sort of couched and situated inside a suburban, typically suburban area where there's single family homes, where there's yards, less density. To get ahead of that wave, it would have been a hugely beneficial. And I think a lot of our home builder clients and rental developer clients and master plan community developers and everything like that, it really benefited from that, especially now post-pandemic. 30 plus million people are working from home at least a couple of days a week. Really bodes well for that.
Yeah. And I noticed you mentioned at least a couple of days a week. And I think that's really interesting. In some ways, I feel like office space shifted in the pandemic from downtown urban environment to homes, right? We had this massive demand for office space in the homes, and then it's slowly starting to shift back. But I'm curious if the demand for an in-home office isn't changing. It's still there, and I kind of wonder if there was a structural change in what people needed post-pandemic versus before. Curious if you've observed that.
Yeah. So, one of the benefits of my job is that we collect so much data on kind of every corner of the housing market. So we run surveys to designers and architects and really kind of see what's at the forefront of what kind of homes are being built and what features are in demand or falling out of demand. One takeaway is that work from home has stuck around. 30 plus million people are working from home at least a couple of days a week. I think maybe early on in the pandemic, maybe 2021, 2022, when even more were working at home 5 days a week, there was, I think, a rush to have a whole bedroom that could be, repurposed as an office. I think what builders and developers are learning now is that it can be, a den or a small, it can be double as a large closet even. I'm working from home now. This would have been a bedroom if someone else is living here, not working from home. It's a pretty decent sized room, but it probably doesn't need to be as big. So I think home developers recognizing that affordability is such a concern, they're really putting square footage into the home into places that are get more use, like a kitchen, for instance, less in a home office. And even this is surprising. I just talked with one of our clients recently who has a rental property, at least one rental property in Denver. And they said that their work from home pods or their sort of co-working pods that are part of the amenities of that property usually have a wait list every day. So they're filled up.
Oh, no kidding.
So
interesting.
So it's still in very much demand. It's still very much happening and definitely impacting housing.
Is there a specific topic within demographics that you study that it's Friday night, you could be doing anything you want to do and you're like, oh, I got to look this up. Like, this is the thing that is killing me right now. Is there a curious question that you kind of go after that's more of a passion than even like your job?
Yeah, I'd say the thing I probably think about the most is migration patterns around the U.S. If I was to zoom out and say, why does that take up so much of my attention is a couple things. One is the publicly available data on migration is not great. So typically it's from the census. Even if we didn't have a shutdown, we wouldn't see county level migration patterns from the census through the middle part of 2025 until early 2026. So it's at least 9 months old up to almost 2 years old by the time it comes out. We have a a data source in-house, so a private vendor that keeps current addresses for a lot of adults in the country. And they don't pass us any personal identifiable information, but what they do send us is a report every month saying how many people moved from county A to county B, how many from county A to county C, and vice versa. So we can see, again, up to them within a couple of months, almost real-time migration trends in the country. And we have it for virtually every county in the country that has anyone living in it, 900 metro areas. It's like a sea of data to be like immersed in. And there's always interesting things to talk about with migration trends. And especially now that the US has, birth rates are generally flat, death rates will likely rise in the future. At some point in the future, population growth is going to be purely from migration. So people moving out, people moving in, and people moving out.
Are you seeing the reverse trend to San Francisco? I see rental rates going up there. Some of the most bearish people on YouTube, Reventure, has even said, "Hey, I think it might be a good time to buy a condo in San Francisco." Curious if you're seeing that in migration data.
Yeah, it's funny. San Francisco has been sort of like has had a lot more of my attention than probably is needed on some level. I used to live there. I lived there from like 2007 to 2009. It's my favorite city in the world. I haven't been back in a long time, but yeah, I started noticing actually about maybe 6 months, a year ago, that migration patterns in San Francisco were looking a lot better than I would have expected, given all the problems that the city had with crime and a lot of the migration, a lot of the move of companies out of the city. And what we find actually is that in our latest month, it had the fewest amount of people moving out of San Francisco as far back as our data goes. So the move out of San Francisco has slowed way, way down. We're not seeing positive migration, net migration into San Francisco yet, but it's the least negative, again, going as far back as our data goes. So this is back to 2018 or so. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the next year or so, or maybe the next 6 months, we could see some months where more households are moving into San Francisco than moving out, which
wild.
We wouldn't have seen in our data yet.
Wow. And do you feel like that is predictive in terms of home prices? We're always trying to figure out like what's a good benchmark. Redfin has this, more sellers than buyers, and it's not been very predictive of any kind of price movement. Mm-hmm. I mean, they have Nashville's more, 100% more sellers than buyers, and Nashville's been relatively flat. Zillow has Nashville up 4% going back to the peak in 22. I guess I could say peak in air quotes because it's still gone up according to the Zillow data. I'm curious if demographic shifts are predictive in terms of pricing houses.
I would say that they provide some of the picture. So I would say migration patterns are a strong input to the demand side. Supply is going to be as much, or if not greater, a factor in prices, especially in this really short term. I would say with migration in San Francisco being, still it's not like a Nashville where it's just so many people so many more people moving in and moving out every month, just right. Perennially. But having it be the least bad it's been in our data history, going back again, almost 6-7 years now, that is a positive. And given what we know about what's going on with the city in terms of investment, and we can see it in apartment rents, that there is a positive sort of, I'd say, demand. And on the demand side, San Francisco is doing a lot better than it was a year ago, 2 years ago. And it just hasn't had a whole lot of supply. So I think there's an influx from there too.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of different things. I've been following you for, I don't know, a couple years, maybe a year. But you've had some, I feel like, bombshell posts. I don't know how else to say it, but you just every now and then you'll post on Twitter. It's not often, but when you post, I'm like, what is this? It's very unique content. It's something you've studied, and it's absolutely fascinating. And one of those posts was about, let me see if I can pull it up here. It's the US to Mexico remittance payments dropping drastically this year, down 2.1 million. And I guess the inference was that might signal that there's 2.1 million people that have either stopped working or have left. And I know when you posted that, it was probably hot off the presses. I'm curious if you've seen that trend like established.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That was kind of mind blowing the first time I saw it when I updated that chart. I think a couple of things that are going on there. One, the studies that I've seen are that generally immigrant workers will send home some kind of remittance payment about once a month. A year-over-year decline in remittance payments of about 2 million, which is what it was, I think, if I remember that data right.
That's right. Yeah, I can pull up the chart here. I've got it.
Yeah, great. 2.1 million decline year over year. Mm-hmm. I think there's a couple of things going on there. Starting in June 24, the inflow of people through the southern border started to slow way down. So this is under the previous administration. They tightened up who they allowed in the country. Then, in January, in February, and March, and the early part of this year, that southern border effectively closed down. So the flow of people into the country through that border, again, went from a lot of people, like record highs in 2023, to record lows now this year. At the same time, what the administration, their policies kind of like, we counted, 36 new immigration policies. There was generally split between reducing the number of people coming into the country, changing the legal status of people that were already here that might have entered legally in the past, and then 3, removing existing residents, so deporting or removing in some other way. We also picked up from some of the government statistics a drop in response rates from the Hispanic population or the immigrant population. And then we also saw from some public companies that they were saying, our demand for our products. So like Constellation Brands is one example, who sells Modelo beer. They said on their earnings call that, this population that they serve, the Hispanic population, are gathering less. So they're buying less beer, and it's impacting demand for their product. We also heard from other companies that are serving this population that demand is falling. So there's some disparate facts here, and again, we're triangulating what is actually going on. I think there's some decrease in labor force participation for the immigrant population. There's some. I think what's probably more likely that's going on is that this population is now doing what they can do to sort of evade surveillance and stay out of the purview of any kind of government agency. So they're responding to government surveys less. They're not out shopping at grocery stores or out at restaurants as much. We've heard from some of our homebuilder panel that we survey every month that some crews aren't showing up to work on a given day if they think that the job site will get raided, for instance. If I would amend that post from back then, I think what I would say is they're just fewer people are sending money back home because they don't want to be tracked.
At this point, you're not confident they just went back home, but they're avoiding places where they can be measured.
That's right. Yeah.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's something I've been watching. My questions revolve around, we are watching rents fall a little bit faster this year than in previous years, even in Nashville. I wonder to what degree this is actually having an impact on the rental market. It's very difficult to tell.
Yeah, like we can't pick up from any of the normal data providers, the immigration status of residents. So we can't really see to what extent demand over the last several years was boosted by immigration and what, any kind of like undercurrents of demand shifts recently. And we have some surveys out to, different parts of the housing market. So we do a survey of apartment developers and owners and investors. We do another survey of single family rental operators and owners, build to rent owners and operators. Yeah, we're going to basically checking with our survey panels, like how do you see any impact from immigration shifts on occupancy levels? Right. We do think it's starting to show up, but we haven't really seen it in data yet. I think the other side of that too is that the job market especially for young people, is very soft right now. New household formation, especially among rentals, is slower than it would be otherwise. A record high share of 25 to 34-year-olds are living with parents. So when the job market started turning and softening in 2023, more in 2024, and even more this year, saw the share of young folks living at home with parents just steadily increase. But roughly 1 in 4 Americans 25 to 34 live with a parent or grandparent, or they live as an additional roommate in someone else's home. So we say that 1 in 4 young adults have yet to move out on their own yet. Normally, there's going to be some share of young adults that live at home or as roommates. So if we were to look at the shift really since 2023, we think about a little over 1 million additional young adults live at home compared to 2023. Those would be people that occupy rental units or maybe would have purchased a home that, again, have moved back in. So if you think about maybe there's 2 adults per household, there's roughly 500,000 missing households just since 2023. At the same time that rental supply has surged and we see a retrenchment in new household formation, that's going to impact rents in a big way.
If we can, I want to shift to Nashville. I screenshotted this. I thought it was absolutely fascinating. When you did this in August, you had the most real-time data that I had seen. I was curious if you're still seeing a strong inbound migration in Nashville.
Yeah, Nashville's I think a really interesting market. So I've definitely tracked it over a while. And I just say from, I know what in 2020 and 2021, everything kind of shut down. People were looking, where else do we want to live? I know at least I can count, 3 or 4 friends that moved from Boulder, Colorado to Nashville. So, and I know this is happening all over the country. Nashville, for some reason, I've been there. It's a great city. It's like great quality of life,
For some reason.
That's
okay.
No, Nashville's great. It's anyway. I could talk more.
It is an outlier, though. I do hear there's other great cities that seem to have shifted. That
right.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but maybe that's what you mean.
Yeah, we saw in 2020, 2021, a little bit into 2022, we saw a massive boom in migration all around the country. And the primary beneficiaries of that were places like Atlanta, Nashville, Charlotte, Boise, Idaho was one, Denver was one, a bunch of markets in Florida also. Generally people moving to where it was lower cost to buy a home, essentially. And for many of those markets that boomed post-pandemic, migration patterns have either normalized or actually significantly weakened. So a market that, a negative example here, a market where migration really boomed post-pandemic was Phoenix, Arizona. And for as far back as I can remember, Phoenix has just had very strong growth because of domestic net migration. It's just no pun intended, quite a hotspot. And Nashville is different. So Nashville has had, again, as far back as I can remember, very strong migration, had even stronger migration during the pandemic. And it has continued to this day, through our latest data, which is through July or August at this point. We still see a lot more households moving into Nashville than moving out.
And you would say that is different than a Phoenix that got a strong inbound, and maybe did it flatline or did any of it reverse?
Yeah, so our latest data in Phoenix, for instance, shows roughly the same amount of people moving in than moved out over the last year. So for a full year, it's basically flatlined, yeah, which is pretty unprecedented for Phoenix.
Interesting. I would think of you've got Florida and Texas. They're having housing markets that are struggling. If there's any place that it's going down, it's there. And then Phoenix in Arizona. Of those places, would you say they're all having a reversion on migration, or would you say that there are other factors at play that may be driving some of that?
It's interesting. I would say for a market like Texas, I would say it's more generalized. You can say that they're having a bit of a reversion. So like Austin, for instance, which is one of the strongest migration markets in the country, sharply declined, roughly flatline, from very strong to roughly flat. It's picked up a little bit since, but you look at Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, those net migration into those markets has slowed down.
I see.
Migration is still pretty strong in San Antonio. It's actually one of the strongest major markets in the country, but it has slowed. It has slowed a lot. Florida is a little bit of a unique animal. So for a few markets where migration has tended to be very positive, they've shifted recently. So Tampa is one example where, again, as far back as I can remember, net migration has been very strong. And starting around about a year ago, it started to dip negative, and it's just increasingly moved negative since then. So
interesting.
But we see if you look at other markets,
that from a storm? Was there a hurricane, or is that what it was?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one. I can't. It might be Harvey. I should know this. But we could see, migration shift right around the time a big storm hit. And when we look closer in, we can see a lot of the net migration out of Tampa is from St. Petersburg, which bore the brunt of that storm. And really interesting for Florida is that they're not moving out of the state necessarily. It's not an outflow or an exodus from Florida. It's more that people are moving from coastal markets exposed to really violent storms that have homes that are really hard to insure now. They're moving more inland. So we see markets like Ocala or Lakeland that are very, very strong migration currently. They've also got a lot of supply.
Right now they're having strong inbound migration.
Yeah.
Interesting. I guess that doesn't fit the narrative that I had in my head.
What was the narrative?
I don't know. Just everybody's leaving Florida because, it's all going down. You look at the Zillow, the list that Lance Lambert posts, and it's like Florida. They're all going down. And so I just assumed that maybe that the migration boom has stopped. Maybe I have a theory that maybe it's the cost to hold that's pushing down home prices, where you have a higher insurance, you have the storms, so it's higher maintenance in Florida. And so people are not going to hang on to get that price that they wanted. And maybe Ocala is booming in terms of home prices. I don't know. I don't track Florida very well.
Prices in Florida are generally pretty soft. It's more, I'd say, on the supply side, the effect of past just skyrocketing prices. Florida had the biggest price boom coming out of the pandemic compared to any other part. Yeah, super cyclical.
You mentioned, I had one other post up here. I kind of want to ask you about it, but it was emerging migrant hotspots from 2023. So you posted this in June of 23. I'm curious, Northern New England, Northwest Arkansas, and Great Lakes. Do you know how the net migration has shaken out in these areas as time has gone on?
Yeah, I could say at least for two of the three, it's been super positive. So Northwest Arkansas, I would say, is emerging. So I know our consultants that do local market studies throughout the country, one of them even, I think in the last year or so, said Northwest Arkansas is an underrated region. It's fairly economically dynamic. It's got a university. It's got a few large corporate presence. So sort of diverse demand drivers. Apparently a really good mountain biking region if you're into that sort of thing. But yeah, Walmart's headquartered there, and they're always expanding and they're always hiring people. It's also really affordable. So I think I remember a few years ago, it might have been, I don't know how long ago, Connor Sen, who's a columnist for Bloomberg, pointed out Northwest Arkansas could be the next Austin. I think he said. I might remember that wrong. So sorry, Connor, if I got that wrong. But just in terms of a economically dynamic region with low cost of housing, possibility of moving there, buying a home, having a really good lifestyle, that's still going on.
Are there any other, if you would say is there any very misunderstood fact about demographics or something that's not paid attention to that you just wave a flag and you're like, please, just something that you feel like doesn't get any attention. It's very important. Is there anything that you call out that you would say that about?
Love the question. I would say that I think one of the things that's probably most misunderstood about demographics is that you can look at the population growth and infer housing demand from just total population growth. At one point in the past, you probably could, but there's a few things that are sort of breaking down in the relationship between population growth and housing demand currently, so that I think it's pretty well understood that birth rates are flat, aging population, so more and more people are going to pass away. Immigration policy is tightened significantly, so we're going to see a lot less immigration in the next few years at least. And so with population growth slowing, shouldn't housing demand also kind of take it on the chin a little bit. What I say to our clients is it really, I think it's worth understanding where the growth and where the declines in the population are actually happening. There's not just regional differences. So the demographic demand for housing in Maine is going to look a lot different from the demographic demand for housing in South Carolina, for instance. Very different age structure of the population, different homes needed, etc. One of those hotspot migration areas was Maine, and it still is. It's a very, it's much lower cost. The costs have risen over the last few years, but it's lower cost relative to Boston or the more inner suburbs. But people are still moving there. Again, regions of the country that are growing or declining. There's going to be parts of the country over the next 5 and 10 years that are going to feel like a booming, emerging market even. And there's going to be parts of the country where it feels like a depression, a recession at least, on demographic demand for housing.
Wow. That's a strong statement. You got to at least name a couple if you're going to say that. I mean, that's pretty strong. Can you name a couple areas?
Let's call it South Carolina, North Carolina. It's very, very strong demographic growth because of in-migration is one. But also, we also see people having more kids in the Southeast. So where birth rates generally are flat or falling in a lot of areas, they're rising in those areas. And young families are actually moving into those markets. So again, like booming demand for early education, like preschools, booming demand for elementary schools, eventually high schools too, where a lot of the country is facing the reality now that the high school and grade school populations have peaked. And from now on, those populations will decline and we'll need fewer and fewer high schools and elementary schools in many parts of the country. That to me looks like a long-term decline that looks like a lowercase d depression in a way. I don't want to be super inflammatory, but that's kind of how I think about it.
Sure.
Then also not just regions, but we also look at different demand driver, different demand segments within the population. So the under 18 population has peaked. Unless we see a sharp turnaround in birth rates, that population is going to continue declining over time. On the other hand, the sort of 25 to 54 population is going to grow by quite a lot over the next 10 years. So those are prime ages where people are moving into their first homes, having kids, etc. And then we're going to see another huge growth in the 75 plus group, almost 50% growth over the next 10 years. So again, I think that bears looking at regions and then age groups. Those are two levels underneath just total population, where I think you can get a lot of insight about housing demand than just looking at population.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for taking time. Do you have, someone want to get a hold of you or what you're promoting? Like, how do they get in touch?
Yeah. So probably the easiest is on LinkedIn or Twitter /X. You can find me there.
Eric, it's so nice to meet you. Yeah. Thanks so much for your time. And yeah, I'd love to stay in touch. And if you send me a link, I'll make sure to post it on the video. And yeah, appreciate you.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks for reaching out. Appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.